Andrew woke up at 6:30 in the morning like he always did, and the first thing he noticed was the way his hand reached for his phone. Not the phone itself, but the motion. It felt practiced, like muscle memory from someone else's body. And for a moment he stared at his own fingers, wondering when they had learned to move with such automatic precision. The screen unlocked before he realized he had entered the passcode. The messages were there, conversations from the night before, responses to people he knew, words that sounded like him but that he could not remember typing. He read them twice, then a third time. They were perfectly ordinary. Friendly, even warm discussions about weekend plans and a joke about coffee that apparently he had made at 11:47 the previous evening. He had been asleep at 11:47. He was certain of that. Almost certain. But the timestamp was there, and the messages had been read by the recipients, and one person had even replied with a laughing emoji, so the joke must have landed. Andrew set the phone down on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling. The crack near the light fixture was still there, the one that looked like a river on a map, and he traced it with his eyes the way he did every morning, finding comfort in its familiarity. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. He got out of bed and walked to the bathroom, and when he looked in the mirror he saw his own face looking back, exactly as it should be. Brown eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow from falling off a bike when he was 9, the slight asymmetry in his smile that he had always been self-conscious about. It was his face, his reflection. But when he smiled, testing it, the expression felt like something he was copying rather than creating. He brushed his teeth and told himself he was being ridiculous. In the kitchen, he opened the refrigerator and found food he did not remember buying. Fresh strawberries in a clear plastic container, the expensive kind from the organic section. A block of aged cheddar cheese. Almond milk, which he had never purchased before because he preferred regular milk, had always preferred regular milk, could remember distinctly thinking almond milk tasted like disappointment. But there it was on the second shelf, opened, partially consumed. He picked it up and checked the expiration date. Still good for another week. He opened the cap and smelled it. It smelled like almond milk. He took a small sip. It tasted exactly the way he expected it to taste, which was somehow more unsettling than if it had tasted wrong. He put it back and closed the refrigerator door. The strawberries could have been on sale. He could have been distracted at the store. The almond milk could have been a mistake or an impulse, or maybe he had been trying to make a change in his diet and simply forgotten about it. People forgot things. It was normal to forget things, especially small things, inconsequential things like what you bought at the grocery store. He made coffee, regular coffee with regular milk that was also in the refrigerator, and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. His email inbox had 43 new messages. He scanned the subject lines. Most were newsletters and promotional offers, the usual digital clutter, but there were 3 work emails that had been sent after business hours. He opened them. The first was from his manager, thanking him for the excellent presentation he had given yesterday. Andrew had not given a presentation yesterday. He had been at his desk working on spreadsheets, quiet routine work that required no presentations. But the email was specific. It mentioned slides, data visualization, the positive response from the client. The second email was from a colleague, asking if he wanted to grab lunch next week to discuss the ideas he had shared during the meeting. The third was from another team member, forwarding him a document and asking for his feedback before Friday. Andrew sat very still, the coffee growing cold in his hands. He checked his calendar. Yesterday, Tuesday, 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon, there was a meeting blocked out. Client presentation. He did not remember adding that to his calendar. He did not remember preparing slides. He did not remember standing in a conference room talking to clients. But the meeting had happened. The emails proved it. His manager was pleased. His colleague wanted to continue the conversation. He must have done well. He opened his work files and found a folder labeled Client Presentation Tuesday. Inside were slides, 17 of them, polished and professional, with his name in the footer. The data was accurate. The formatting was consistent. The talking points in the notes section were articulate and persuasive. It was good work. Better than good. It was exactly the kind of work he would do, the kind of work he prided himself on, and yet he had no memory of creating it. He scrolled through the slides slowly, reading each one, looking for something that felt unfamiliar, some detail that would prove this was not his work, but everything was right. The fonts he preferred, the color scheme he always used, the phrasing that sounded like his own voice. He closed the file and rubbed his eyes. Stress, he thought. It had to be stress. He had been working long hours lately, not sleeping well, and stress could do strange things to memory. Could create gaps, little blank spaces where time went missing. He had read about that somewhere. Dissociative episodes. Burnout. The brain protecting itself by shutting down temporarily. It was nothing to worry about. He just needed to take it easy, get more sleep, maybe take a weekend off. Andrew went to work. The office was familiar, his desk in the usual place by the window. His coworkers greeting him as they always did. But their greetings felt different. Sarah from accounting smiled at him and said something about the presentation, how impressed everyone had been, and he smiled back and thanked her, and the words came out easily, smoothly, like he had said them before. Michael from sales clapped him on the shoulder and made a joke about stealing his secrets, and Andrew laughed, a genuine laugh that he heard coming from his own mouth, and it sounded right. He sat at his desk and opened his computer and started working on the spreadsheets he remembered being in the middle of, but he did not particularly like sourdough. But he said yes, and when the sandwich arrived he took a bite and it tasted good, better than he expected, and he ate the whole thing without thinking about it. On the way back to the office he passed a bookstore and saw a poster in the window for a poetry reading that evening. Contemporary voices, new works, open mic at the end. He stopped and looked at the poster. He had never been to a poetry reading. He did not read poetry. He could not remember the last time he had been inside a bookstore. But something made him take a photo of the poster with his phone, and when he checked his calendar later, he saw that he had already added it as an event. Poetry reading, 7 o'clock, bookstore on 5th Street. He had even set a reminder. The afternoon passed in a blur of emails and phone calls and small tasks that felt both utterly routine and slightly foreign, like watching someone else do his job while he observed from a distance. At 5:30, he packed his bag and left the office, and instead of going home, he walked to the bookstore. The reading had already started when he arrived. He slipped into a seat in the back and listened to a woman with long gray hair read a poem about water, about the way it remembers the shape of every container it fills, and Andrew felt something tighten in his chest. When the open mic began, he stood up. He did not decide to stand up. His body simply moved, walking to the front of the room, taking the microphone from the host, and he began to speak. The words came from somewhere deep, a poem about forgetting, about waking up in a life that fits too perfectly, and the audience listened in silence, and when he finished they applauded. He sat back down, his hands shaking, his heart pounding, and he had no idea where the words had come from. He did not write poetry. He had never written poetry, but the poem had been there, in his mouth, in his mind, waiting to be spoken. That night, back in his apartment, Andrew sat on the couch and tried to remember the day. He could remember waking up, the phone, the messages. He could remember the refrigerator, the almond milk. He could remember going to work, but the hours between were hazy, like trying to recall a dream. He remembered the poetry reading, the feeling of standing at the front of the room, but the poem itself was already fading, slipping away like water through his fingers. He opened his laptop and checked his documents folder. There was a new file, created that evening at 7:14. The title was Untitled Poem. He opened it. The words were there, exactly as he had spoken them, perfectly formatted, ready to be revised or shared or forgotten. He had not typed them. He was certain he had not typed them. But there they were, in his own handwriting, which was impossible because they were digital, but the phrasing was his, the rhythm was his, the voice was unmistakably his own. Andrew did not sleep well that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to hold on to the details of the day, but they kept slipping away, reorganizing themselves into a sequence that made sense but felt wrong. He tried to remember the presentation at work. He closed his eyes and pictured himself in the conference room, standing at the front, clicking through slides, talking to clients, and the image came easily, too easily, like a scene from a movie he had watched rather than something he had lived. He could see himself smiling, gesturing with his hands, making a joke that landed perfectly, but he could not feel it. The memory had no weight, no texture. It was a story about someone who looked like him and acted like him and spoke like him, but it was not him. Or maybe it was him, and he was the one who was wrong, the one who did not fit, the one who was becoming a story about someone else. The next morning he woke up at 6:30 and reached for his phone, and this time he paid attention to the motion. His hand moved in a straight line, no hesitation, no adjustment, like it knew exactly where the phone would be. He caught himself before unlocking it and held the phone in his hand, feeling the weight of it, the smooth glass against his palm. He counted to 10. Then he unlocked it. The messages were there, conversations from the night before, responses to people he knew. He scrolled through them slowly, reading each one, trying to find something that felt wrong, but they all sounded like him. They all sounded exactly like him. One message to his sister, confirming plans for Sunday brunch. One message to an old college friend, sharing an article about climate change. One message to someone named Rachel, a name he recognized but could not quite place, making plans to meet for coffee on Saturday. He read the message thread with Rachel. They had been messaging for weeks, apparently. Easy conversation, casual flirting, the kind of rapport that develops over time. He scrolled back to the beginning, looking for the first message, and found it dated 3 weeks ago. A mutual friend had introduced them at a party. They had talked for hours. She had given him her number. He did not remember any party 3 weeks ago. He did not remember anyone named Rachel. But the messages were there, dozens of them, building a relationship that existed entirely in his phone. He got out of bed and went to the bathroom, and when he looked in the mirror, he studied his face carefully. Same brown eyes, same scar, same asymmetry in his smile. But something was different. The way he was standing, maybe, or the angle of his head, or the expression in his eyes. He tried different expressions, smiling, frowning, raising his eyebrows, but they all felt slightly wrong, slightly rehearsed, like he was trying to remember how his own face was supposed to move. He leaned closer to the mirror, looking for some sign, some proof that he was still himself, but all he saw was a man who looked like Andrew, who had Andrew's face and Andrew's body and Andrew's scar from falling off a bike when he was 9, and who was that enough? If you looked, maybe somewhere in his brain there was a version of himself who had given that presentation, who had prepared those slides, who had stood in front of those clients and performed brilliantly, and that version was leaking into this one, replacing his memories with better ones, more successful ones, the kind of memories he wished he had. He tried to hold on to the uncertainty, the wrongness, but it was getting harder. The more people confirmed the presentation had happened, the more real it became, and the less sure he was that his own memories could be trusted. He went to the bathroom and locked himself in a stall and took out his phone. He opened the Notes app and typed, "I am Andrew. I do not remember giving a presentation yesterday. I do not like almond milk. I have never been to a poetry reading. These are facts." He read the words over and over, trying to make them feel true, but they just looked like sentences, statements that could be true or false depending on the evidence, and the evidence was against him. He deleted the note and put his phone away. When he came out of the bathroom, his manager was waiting by his desk. She smiled at him, a warm, genuine smile, and asked if he had a minute to talk. He followed her to her office, and she closed the door and told him she had been thinking about his career trajectory, about his potential, and she wanted to offer him a promotion. Team lead, more responsibility, better pay, a chance to work on bigger projects. He heard himself accept. The words came out confident, grateful, professional, all the right words in the right order, and she shook his hand and told him she knew he would do great things. When he got back to his desk, there was an email waiting for him confirming the promotion, effective immediately. He had not said yes. Or he had said yes, but he had not meant to, had not decided to. The decision had been made by someone who sounded like him but was not him, except it was him, it had to be him, because who else could it be? That evening he went home and found a bag of groceries on his kitchen counter. Fresh vegetables, chicken breasts, a bottle of white wine. He did not remember buying them. He checked his phone. No delivery confirmation, no receipt, nothing to indicate where they had come from. He checked the bag. No store logo, no sticker, just plain brown paper. He picked up the wine bottle and read the label. A Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, a specific vineyard, a vintage he had never heard of. He opened it and poured a glass. Tasted perfect. Crisp and clean with notes of citrus and grass. Exactly the kind of wine he would choose if he knew anything about wine, which he did not or thought he did not, but apparently he did now because he had chosen it or someone had chosen it for him, and that someone was becoming harder to distinguish from himself. He cooked dinner. He did not decide to cook dinner. He just found himself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, seasoning the chicken, moving through the motions with practiced ease. The knife felt good in his hand. The rhythm of chopping was meditative. He sautéed the vegetables in olive oil, seared the chicken until the skin was crispy, plated everything with a side of rice that he did not remember cooking but that was somehow ready at exactly the right moment. He sat at the kitchen table and ate slowly, tasting each bite, and it was the best meal he had ever made. He knew that because he could remember other meals, other nights of cooking, a whole catalog of dinners that ranged from mediocre to decent, and this one was better, significantly better, like he had been taking cooking classes, except he had not been taking cooking classes. He had been doing something, though. Someone had been doing something. Someone who looked like him and cooked like him and was slowly, carefully, replacing everything he knew about himself with something better. Andrew washed the dishes and went to the bedroom and opened his closet. His clothes were organized by color, shirts on the left, pants on the right, shoes lined up neatly on the floor. He did not organize his clothes by color. He had never organized his clothes at all. He just threw them in the closet and pulled out whatever was clean. But here they were, perfectly arranged, and when he looked closer he noticed that some of the clothes were new. A gray sweater he had never seen before. A pair of dark jeans that fit perfectly when he tried them on. A leather jacket that looked expensive and felt expensive and made him look like someone who wore leather jackets, which he was not or had not been or was becoming. He took off the jacket and hung it back up and closed the closet door. Then he opened it again and put the jacket on and looked at himself in the mirror. It looked good. It looked right. He looked like someone who had his life together, someone confident and successful and slightly mysterious, someone who went to poetry readings and drank New Zealand wine and wore leather jackets without irony. He looked like the kind of person he had always wanted to be. He took off the jacket and sat on the bed and tried to think. The problem was that everything made sense. The almond milk, the presentation, the promotion, the cooking, the clothes, all of it added up to a version of himself that was better than the original, and what was wrong with that? People changed. People improved. They learned new skills, developed new tastes, became more than they had been. That was growth. That was healthy. Except growth was supposed to be a choice, a conscious effort, and he did not remember choosing any of this. He did not remember deciding to become this person. It was just happening, slowly, imperceptibly, like erosion, and he was standing on the edge watching pieces of himself wash away and being replaced with something smoother, something more polished, something that fit better into the life he was supposed to have. His phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Looking forward to Saturday. There was a coffee cup emoji and a smiley face. He stared at the message, trying to remember who Rachel was, trying to pull up any memory of meeting her, talking to her, making plans, but there was nothing. Just the messages, the evidence of a relationship he had apparently been building for weeks. He could scroll back through the conversation again, reread every exchange. He could remember his childhood, or he could remember remembering his childhood, which was not quite the same thing. The memories had been accessed so many times, replayed so often, that they had become smooth and worn, like stones in a river, and he could not be sure anymore which details were real and which had been added later, unconsciously, to make the story better or more coherent or more meaningful. He tried to remember yesterday. The morning routine, the phone, the messages from the night before that he did not remember sending. Going to work, people congratulating him, his manager offering him a promotion. Coming home, finding groceries, cooking dinner. Each event was clear and specific, but they did not connect. There were gaps between them, small blank spaces where time had passed but he could not account for it. He remembered sitting at his desk at work, and then he remembered walking to the bathroom, but he did not remember standing up or walking through the office or opening the bathroom door. The transitions were missing. The in-between moments that made life feel continuous had been cut out, and what remained was a series of scenes that played one after another without causation or flow. He went to the kitchen and made coffee, regular coffee with regular milk, and it tasted wrong. Too heavy, too rich, He dumped it out and made another cup with almond milk, and it tasted right, and he hated that it tasted right. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and searched for information about memory loss, dissociative episodes, identity disorders. The articles were clinical and reassuring. Stress could cause temporary amnesia. Trauma could fragment memory. Sleep deprivation could create false memories or erase real ones. All of it was treatable. All of it was normal. But none of it explained why his phone contained messages he had sent, why his computer contained work he had completed, why his refrigerator contained food he had bought, all while he was apparently somewhere else, doing something else, being someone else. He checked his bank account. There were transactions from the past week that he did not recognize. The grocery store 3 times. A bookstore, the one where he had been to the poetry reading. A clothing store where he had apparently bought the gray sweater and the leather jacket. A restaurant, an expensive one, where he had apparently taken someone to dinner 2 nights ago. He checked his calendar. Tuesday night, 7:30, dinner reservation, and next to it, in his own handwriting, a single name. Rachel. He had taken Rachel to dinner. He had ordered food, paid the check, probably held doors and smiled and made conversation, and he remembered none of it. Or maybe he did remember it somewhere deep down, and his conscious mind was refusing to acknowledge it, protecting him from the realization that he was losing time, losing whole chunks of his life to a version of himself that was more functional, more social, more successful, and that was slowly taking over. The doorbell rang. Andrew did not move. It rang again, a long, insistent buzz, and he went to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman was standing in the hallway, mid-30s, dark hair, holding a coffee cup and smiling. He did not recognize her. He opened the door. She said his name, Andrew, with easy familiarity, and walked past him into the apartment. She set the coffee cup on the counter and turned to face him, still smiling, and said she had been worried when he did not show up for their morning run. He stared at her. Morning run. They apparently went running together every morning. She was wearing athletic clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked at him with an expression that was equal parts concern and affection. He told her he was not feeling well. She touched his forehead, checking for fever, and her hand was cool and gentle. She told him to go back to bed. She would take care of him. He did not argue. He let her guide him to the bedroom, let her pull back the covers, let her tuck him in like a child. She sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed his hair back from his forehead, and her touch was familiar, comfortable, like she had done this before, many times before, and he realized she was not a stranger. She was someone he knew, someone important, someone who had a key to his apartment and a place in his life, and he could not remember how she had gotten there. She said her name was Emma. She said they had been together for 6 months. She said they had met at a yoga class, which was strange because he did not do yoga, but apparently he did or had started to, and they had clicked immediately, and she had never been happier. She said all of this in a soft voice, sitting on the edge of his bed, holding his hand, and he let her talk because he did not know what else to do. When she finished, she leaned down and kissed his forehead and told him to rest, and she left the bedroom, and he heard her moving around in the kitchen, opening cabinets, running water, making herself at home in his space, and he lay there trying to decide if he should stop her or thank her or tell her to leave or beg her to stay. He fell asleep. He did not mean to fall asleep, but his eyes closed, and when he opened them again, it was afternoon. The apartment was quiet. Emma was gone. There was a note on the nightstand, written in handwriting he did not recognize. Feel better. I'll check on you tonight. Love, Emma. He picked up the note and studied the handwriting, the looping letters, the way she dotted her eyes with small circles, and it meant nothing to him. He folded the note and put it in the drawer of his nightstand, and when he opened the drawer he found other notes, dozens of them, little messages that Emma had apparently been leaving for him for months. Miss you already. Don't forget the laundry. You make me happy. Each one was signed with her name and a small heart, and they were arranged chronologically. The oldest ones at the bottom, faded and creased, the newest ones on top, still fresh. He had kept them all. He had saved them. He looked like the kind of person Emma would date, the kind of person who got promoted at work, the kind of person who wrote poetry and drank good wine and cooked elaborate dinners. He looked like someone he did not recognize. His phone buzzed. A message from Emma. Dinner at 7? I'm making your favorite. He stared at the message. He did not know what his favorite was. He did not remember telling Emma his favorite anything. But she knew, apparently, and she was making it for him, and he was expected to show up and eat it and be grateful and normal. He typed a response. Sounds great. The words felt hollow, performative, but they were the right words, the words that would make Emma happy, and making Emma happy seemed important even though he could not remember why. He spent the rest of the afternoon trying to piece together his life. He went through his phone, reading every message, every email, looking at every photo. There were pictures of him and Emma, dozens of them. At restaurants, at parks, at the beach. They looked happy together. They looked like a couple who had been together for 6 months, who had built a relationship based on inside jokes and shared experiences and genuine affection. In one photo, they were hiking, standing on top of a mountain with their arms around each other, both of them sweaty and grinning. He did not remember that hike. He did not remember ever going hiking. But the photo was real, the timestamp was there, and he was in it, smiling, looking happy, looking like someone who enjoyed hiking. He opened his laptop and checked his browser history. Searches for yoga studios, recipes for vegetarian meals, articles about sustainable living. He did not care about sustainable living. He had never cared about sustainable living. But apparently he cared now, or the version of himself that used his computer cared, and that version had been researching and learning and changing his life in ways that made sense for someone who was trying to be better, to live better, to become the kind of person who deserved someone like Emma. At 7 o'clock, he walked to Emma's apartment. It was only 3 blocks away, close enough that he should have recognized the building, but he did not. He checked the address on his phone to make sure he was in the right place, and when he knocked on the door, Emma opened it immediately, like she had been waiting for him. She smiled and pulled him inside and kissed him. A quick, comfortable kiss that suggested familiarity and routine, and he kissed her back because that was what he was supposed to do. The apartment smelled like garlic and herbs. She had set the table with candles and wine glasses and cloth napkins. She told him to sit down, she would bring the food. He sat and watched her move around the kitchen with easy confidence, plating pasta, pouring wine, chatting about her day at work. She worked in marketing, apparently. She was working on a big campaign for a tech company. She was stressed but excited. She asked him about his day, and he told her he had been sick, and she made a sympathetic sound and told him he worked too hard. He needed to take better care of himself. He nodded and drank his wine and let her talk. The food was delicious. Fresh pasta with homemade pesto, a simple green salad, crusty bread. She said it was his favorite, and maybe it was, or maybe it was becoming his favorite because he ate every bite and asked for seconds and complimented her cooking with genuine enthusiasm. They talked about the weekend, about their plans to go to a farmer's market on Saturday morning before meeting Rachel for coffee. He did not correct her. He did not tell her he had no idea who Rachel was beyond the messages in his phone. He just nodded and agreed and played along, and it was easy, surprisingly easy, to pretend he remembered things he did not remember, to act like the person Emma thought he was. After dinner, they sat on the couch and watched a movie, some romantic comedy that Emma loved and that he apparently loved too, because he laughed at all the right moments and quoted lines along with the actors, lines he did not remember memorizing but that came out of his mouth anyway. Emma leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his, and it felt nice. It felt comfortable. It felt like something he had done 100 times before, and maybe he had, in the gaps between the moments he could remember, in the blank spaces where someone else had been living his life. When the movie ended, Emma asked if he wanted to stay over. He said yes. He did not think about it, did not weigh the decision, just said yes and followed her to the bedroom. They undressed and got into bed, and the motions were automatic, practiced, like a dance they had choreographed together over months of repetition. She fell asleep quickly, curled against him, her breathing slow and steady, and he lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling her warmth, her presence, wondering who she was sleeping next to. Was it him? Andrew, the person who woke up yesterday morning confused and scared? Or was it the other him, the better him, the one who remembered her and loved her and had built this life with her? And if it was the other him, where was the original? Was he fading away, being overwritten line by line like text in a document, replaced with something more coherent, more functional, more worthy of love? He tried to hold on to the fear. He tried to maintain the sense that something was wrong, that he was losing himself, that he needed to fight back or resist or at least understand what was happening. But the fear was slipping away, dissolving into the comfort of Emma's bed, the warmth of her body, the rightness of being wanted. It was hard to be afraid when everything felt so good. It was hard to insist that something was wrong when all the evidence suggested that things were finally going right. In the morning, he woke up before Emma and lay there watching her sleep. She looked peaceful. At work, everyone treated him like the person he was becoming. His manager asked how he was settling into his new role. His colleagues invited him to lunch. Someone mentioned the poetry reading and asked when he was performing again. He fielded every question with confidence, every interaction with ease, and by the end of the day he realized he had stopped trying to remember. He had stopped checking his phone for messages he did not recall sending, stopped looking for evidence of time he had lost. He had accepted it. The gaps were still there, but they were smaller now, less frequent, and the person filling them was someone he recognized, someone he liked, someone who was making his life better in every measurable way. That evening he met Rachel for coffee. She was exactly as he had imagined from their messages, warm and funny and easy to talk to. And they spent 2 hours at a corner table discussing books and music and their shared frustration with the state of the world. At some point she mentioned the party where they had met, and he nodded along, and the memory assembled itself in his mind as she talked, filling in details he had not known he knew, constructing a narrative that felt real enough. When they parted ways, she hugged him and said she was glad they had reconnected, and he hugged her back and said he was too, and the words were true. He was glad. He liked Rachel. She was a good person to know, a valuable addition to his life, and if he could not remember meeting her, well, what did that matter? The friendship was real. The connection was real. The person she was getting to know was real, even if that person was not entirely the one who had woken up confused and frightened a few days ago. Andrew went home and made dinner, a simple stir-fry with vegetables and tofu, and while he cooked he thought about the pattern. Every day, a little more of his life made sense. Every day, a few more gaps filled in. Every day, he became slightly more certain about who he was and what he wanted and how to navigate the world he found himself in. The process was gentle, efficient, almost kind. It was not forcing him to be someone he did not want to be. It was just helping him become the person he had always wanted to be, removing the obstacles, smoothing out the rough edges, replacing doubt with confidence and fear with certainty. He ate his dinner slowly, tasting each bite, and realized he was happy. Actually happy, not pretending, not performing, but genuinely content with his life, with his job, with Emma and Rachel and the other people who populated his days. The happiness was quiet and steady, the kind that came from having routines and relationships and a sense of purpose. It was the kind of happiness he had always thought he wanted but had never quite achieved, and now here it was, being handed to him piece by piece, and all he had to do was accept it. That night he called his mother. He did not know why. The impulse just came, and he followed it, and when she answered she sounded surprised and pleased. They had not talked in months, apparently, or maybe they had, and he had forgotten, but she asked how he was and he told her he was good, really good, and she asked about Emma and he told her Emma was wonderful, and his mother said she was so glad to hear it. She had been worried about him, but he sounded different now, happier, more like himself. He thanked her and they talked for a while about nothing important, just easy, comfortable conversation, and when he hung up he felt lighter, like he had repaired something without knowing it was broken. Over the next few weeks, the gaps continued to close. He remembered more and more of his days, the transitions between moments becoming smoother, the blank spaces filling in with experiences that felt authentic and lived. He stopped questioning the messages in his phone, the entries in his calendar, the work in his computer. He stopped looking for evidence that he was losing time. He just lived, moving through his days with increasing ease, and the person he was becoming felt less like a stranger and more like an inevitability. He went running with Emma every morning. He attended yoga classes twice a week. He cooked elaborate meals and read poetry and had long conversations with Rachel about philosophy and politics. He excelled at his new role at work, leading his team with confidence and insight. He became the kind of person people wanted to be around, the kind of person who made others feel seen and valued and understood. And somewhere in the process of becoming that person, he stopped being the person he had been before Or maybe he had never been that person at all, and the confused, frightened man who had woken up a few weeks ago was just a glitch, a temporary disruption in the smooth operation of a life that was always meant to unfold exactly this way. One evening, several weeks after it all started, Andrew sat in his apartment with Emma, both of them on the couch, her reading a book and him scrolling through his phone, and he realized he could not remember what he had been worried about. The fear that had gripped him at the beginning, the sense that something was terribly wrong, had evaporated completely. He tried to summon it back, tried to recreate the panic he had felt looking at messages he did not remember sending, but it was gone. All that remained was a vague sense that there had been a problem, once something about memory or identity or time, but the details were hazy and unimportant. His life was good. His life was exactly what he wanted it to be. Why would he question that? Emma looked up from her book and smiled at him, and he smiled back, and in that moment he understood. The horror was not that he was being replaced. The horror was that he was cooperating. Every day he chose to accept the new memories, the new preferences, the new relationships. Every day he chose not to fight, not to resist, not to insist on remaining the person he had been. And the choice was so easy, so natural, because the person he was becoming was better in every way. Happier, more successful, more loved. The original Andrew, whoever he had been, was being gently erased, overwritten line by line with someone more functional, more complete, and he was letting it happen. He just lived, fully and completely, inhabiting each moment as it came, and the life he was living felt authentic in a way his old life never had. This was who he was supposed to be. This was who he had always been, underneath the doubt and fear and self-consciousness. The other Andrew, the one who had been so worried about losing himself, had been the anomaly, the mistake, and now that mistake was being corrected. One morning he woke up at 6:30 and reached for his phone without thinking. And as he scrolled through his messages, he felt nothing but contentment. The conversations were his. The plans were his. The life documented in his calendar was his. There were no gaps, no missing time, no sense that someone else had been piloting his body while he was away. He was present, fully present, in every moment, and the presence felt like a gift. He got out of bed and went to the bathroom and looked at his face in the mirror. Brown eyes, scar above the left eyebrow, asymmetry in his smile, but the expression was different now. Confident, settled, complete. He looked like someone who knew exactly who he was, and the knowing was effortless, instinctive, the way it should be. He smiled at his reflection, and the smile was genuine, and he realized with absolute clarity that the process was finished. He was not being replaced. He had been replaced. The person looking back at him from the mirror was not the person who had woken up terrified and confused all those weeks ago. That person was gone, erased so gently and thoroughly that even the memory of him was fading, becoming just another story about someone who might have existed once, or might not have, and it did not matter either way because the person who existed now was better, happier, more complete. Andrew turned away from the mirror and went to make coffee, almond milk, no hesitation, and as he moved through his morning routine he felt something that might have been relief or might have been loss. But the distinction was impossible to make because both emotions came from the same source, the understanding that he was no longer the person he had been and never would be again. The transformation was complete. The overwriting was done. And the terrible, beautiful truth was that he did not mind. He did not mind at all. He was better now. He was whole. He was exactly who he was supposed to be, and the person he had replaced was just a rough draft, a first attempt, a version that had never quite worked. This version worked. This version fit. This version was loved and successful and happy, and if the cost of that happiness was the complete erasure of whoever he had been before, well, that was a cost he was willing to pay. Had already paid, was still paying, every moment, every day, with every choice to accept rather than resist, to adapt rather than fight, to become rather than remain. He poured his coffee and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the morning light, and felt the last traces of the old Andrew dissolve into the new one. And the dissolution was painless, seamless, like water absorbing into water, and when it was done there was no boundary left, no line between who he had been and who he was now. Just a single continuous self that extended backward and forward through time without interruption or doubt. He took a sip of his coffee. Tasted perfect. Everything tasted perfect. Everything was perfect. And the person drinking the coffee, standing at the window, living this life, was not pretending anymore. He was not performing. He was not cooperating with his own erasure. He was just being, just existing, just Andrew, singular and complete, with no memory of ever having been anyone else.